The perfect beginning. Emily had always believed in love, the kind that made hearts race, the kind found in novels and romantic movies. But in all her years of dating, she had never experienced it herself. That changed the moment she met Ryan. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when their paths first crossed. She was in a quaint little bookstore, lost in the pages of a classic romance novel, when a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. "That's a great choice," he said, pointing at the book in her hands. Emily looked up to find a man with warm hazel eyes and an easy smile. He was effortlessly handsome, dressed in a navy blue sweater and jeans, exuding both confidence and charm. She smiled back, intrigued. "You've read it?" she asked. "Twice. And I'd read it again if it meant having a reason to talk to a beautiful woman in a bookstore." Emily laughed, a little taken aback by his boldness, but charmed nonetheless. They struck up a conversation about books, movies, and their mutual love for old cafes. Before she knew it, they had spent nearly an hour talking, completely lost in each other's presence. Ryan was different from anyone she had ever met. He had an effortless way of making her feel special, as if she were the only person in the world who mattered in that moment. When he finally asked for her number, she didn't hesitate. Their first date was nothing short of magical. Ryan took her to a rooftop restaurant with fairy lights twinkling above them and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. He listened intently as she spoke about her dreams, her childhood, and her passion for writing. He shared stories of his own, of traveling across Europe, of his love for adventure and photography. Every moment with him felt like a scene from a dream, unexpected, exhilarating, and overwhelmingly perfect. He surprised her with thoughtful gestures, her favorite flowers at her doorstep, handwritten notes tucked into her bag, spontaneous late-night drives just to watch the stars. Her friends noticed the glow in her eyes, the way she smiled more, laughed more. "He's too good to be true," one of them had remarked jokingly, and Emily had laughed it off. Of course it felt too good to be true. But wasn't that what love was supposed to feel like? Ryan had a way of making her believe in forever. He spoke of their future, of all the places they would travel to, the adventures they would share. He called her his person, the one he had been waiting for all his life. Emily had never felt so sure about anything before. It was as if fate had finally given her the love story she had always dreamed of. She thought it was true love, but then, fairy tale romance. From the moment Ryan entered Emily's life, everything felt like a dream. He wasn't just charming, he was thoughtful, attentive, and effortlessly romantic. Their love story unfolded like the pages of a novel, each day bringing something more magical than the last. Ryan had a way of making every moment feel special. He planned surprise dates that felt straight out of a movie, a candlelit dinner on a secluded beach, a spontaneous weekend getaway to the countryside, even a night of slow dancing under fairy lights in her living room. Every detail was carefully thought out, as if he had studied her heart and knew exactly what would make it race. But it wasn't just the grand gestures, it was the little things too. He remembered how she took her coffee, always bringing it just the way she liked on lazy Sunday mornings. He noticed when she was stressed and sent her voice notes reminding her to breathe, telling her how proud he was of her. He listened, not just to her words, but to her silence, always knowing when she needed comfort, when she needed space, and when she needed to be reminded of how deeply she was loved. Their conversations stretched late into the night, both unwilling to hang up the phone, as if time itself had no hold over them. They spoke about everything: dreams, fears, childhood memories, and the kind of love they had both longed for, but never truly found until now. "I feel like I've known you forever," Emily whispered one evening, lying next to him under a sky full of stars. Ryan turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe we were meant to find each other in every lifetime," he said. "You're it for me, Emily, my forever." His words melted into her soul, making her believe in love like never before. He spoke of the future as if it were already written, of the places they would visit, the home they would build together, the life that awaited them. For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just in love. She was certain that she had found the one, that fairy tales weren't just for books, that love like this wasn't just a fleeting moment but a promise of forever. But fairy tales always have a twist, and soon, Emily would realize that not all promises are meant to be kept. Subtle red flags. At first, everything seemed perfect. Ryan was attentive, loving, and always knew the right words to say. But as time passed, small things started to feel off. Tiny details that didn't quite add up, moments that made Emily pause, yet she always found a way to explain them away. It started with little inconsistencies in his stories. One evening, Ryan told her about a childhood trip to Italy, describing how he and his brother got lost in the winding streets of Rome. A few weeks later, he mentioned that he had never been to Italy, that it was still on his bucket list. Emily laughed it off at the time, thinking maybe he had been talking about a different trip, or maybe she had misheard. Then there were the phone calls he never answered when they were together. His phone would ring, and he'd glance at the screen before silencing it, offering a casual excuse. Just work stuff, nothing important. Or sometimes, he'd step outside to take a call, returning with a slightly different energy, but always quick to kiss her and change the subject. One night, as they were cuddled up on the couch, a message flashed across his phone screen. Emily caught a glimpse of it before he swiftly turned the screen away. "Can't wait to see you again," it read. Her heart stuttered. Who was that? She wanted to ask. But before she could, Ryan chuckled and set his phone aside. "Spam texts are getting weirder every day," he said lightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead as if that would erase her unease. She wanted to believe him. After all, hadn't he been nothing but wonderful to her? Why would she let one vague message plant seeds of doubt in her heart? There were other small things too, like how he never seemed to have a solid answer about where he was at certain times. "I was just out running errands," he'd say, but when she asked what errands, he'd vaguely mention groceries or dry cleaning, except she never saw any bags, or how he sometimes avoided introducing her to certain people in his life. "You'll meet them soon," he always promised, but soon never seemed to come. And then there was the night they ran into a woman at a restaurant, someone Ryan clearly knew. Emily noticed the way the woman's face shifted when she saw him, the brief flicker of recognition, followed by something else. Something like disappointment. "Oh, hi," the woman said, forcing a polite smile. "Hey, good to see you," Ryan replied casually, but his hand tightened around Emily's just a little too much. As soon as the woman walked away, he changed the subject. Emily felt a strange discomfort settle in her chest, but she told herself she was overthinking. Ryan loved her. He had shown her that in 100 different ways, and so she silenced the voice in her head. She convinced herself that love meant trust, that these were just coincidences, misunderstandings. She wasn't ready to see the cracks forming in the perfect picture she had painted of them. Not yet. Manipulation and control. At first, Emily mistook Ryan's possessiveness for love. "I just don't want to share you with the world," he would say, his fingers tracing circles on her skin. "You're mine, and I want all of you." The words made her heart race, made her feel special, until she realized what they truly meant. It started with small things. Ryan would casually mention how he didn't like the way one of her friends spoke to her. "She doesn't really respect you," he'd say. "I don't know why you let her treat you like that." At first, Emily defended her friend, but the seed of doubt was planted. The next time her friend made an offhand joke, Emily found herself wondering, was Ryan right? Then it was her family. "Your sister is so negative," he remarked one evening after they had dinner with her family. "She's always bringing you down. Have you noticed that?" Emily hadn't, not really, but after Ryan pointed it out, she started seeing things differently. Every critique, every disagreement, felt like an attack. Maybe he's right. Maybe they don't really understand me the way he does. The changes were so gradual that she didn't notice how isolated she was becoming. She started canceling plans more often. "I just want to spend the night with you," Ryan would say, his voice soft, his eyes pleading. And how could she say no to that? If she went out without him, he made her feel guilty. I just miss you when you're gone, he'd text repeatedly. If she didn't reply fast enough, he'd ask, Are you ignoring me? When she did spend time with friends, he'd sulk when she got home. You looked like you were having fun without me, he'd say, his tone light, but his eyes dark. She started pulling away from the people who loved her, not because they had done anything wrong, but because being around them felt complicated now. Ryan had a way of twisting things, making her question her own reality. I never said you couldn't go out, Emily. You're just making a big deal out of nothing. I'm not controlling, I just love you more than anyone else ever has. I don't know why you keep picking fights with me. I thought we were happy. And Emily, exhausted from the constant tug of war in her mind, started to believe him. After all, wasn't love about making sacrifices? Wasn't it normal to prioritize your partner over everyone else? Ryan wasn't controlling, he was just protective. He wasn't isolating her, he just wanted her all to himself. That was love, wasn't it? At least, that's what she kept telling herself, until the day she couldn't anymore. The unraveling truth. Emily had grown used to ignoring the nagging doubts in her mind. She had learned to justify the inconsistencies, to convince herself that Ryan's love was just intense, not suffocating. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how hard you try to look away. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Emily had borrowed Ryan's car to run errands, something she rarely did since he preferred to drive whenever they went out together. As she reached into the glove compartment to grab a tissue, her fingers brushed against something smooth. A phone. Not his phone. Her heart pounded as she pulled it out, staring at the black screen. It wasn't locked. Curiosity, no, instinct, took over as she swiped up. Messages filled the screen. Dozens of them. Some were simple. Miss you. Others were gut-wrenching. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Emily's breath hitched. Her vision blurred. She scrolled further. Photos. A woman she didn't recognize, smiling at the camera, with Ryan's arm wrapped around her waist. Dates stamped in the corner. Days when he had told Emily he was working late or out with the guys. Her stomach twisted as a call came through. The name flashed on the screen. Sophie. Without thinking, she answered. Hey, babe, a soft, familiar voice greeted. Emily couldn't speak. Ryan? You there? The silence stretched before Sophie exhaled sharply. Wait, who is this? Emily's grip tightened on the phone. I should be asking you that. A pause, then a quiet, knowing sigh. Oh God, you're her, aren't you? The weight of those words crushed Emily's chest. Her, not the only one. Before Sophie could say anything else, Emily hung up, her hands trembling. Her mind raced back to all the warning signs she had ignored, the hidden messages, the unanswered calls, the excuses. She had spent months convincing herself that love meant trust, that love meant choosing him over her own instincts. But love wasn't supposed to feel like this. She gripped the phone, her pulse hammering. Ryan had stolen her heart with pretty words and grand gestures, but now the illusion was shattering. And for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid of the truth. She was ready to face it. Gaslighting and denial. Emily sat on Ryan's couch, the secret phone clutched in her trembling hands. Her mind was racing, replaying every moment, every lie, every excuse she had ignored. The weight of the betrayal pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Ryan walked in, his usual confident smile faltering as he saw her expression. What's wrong? He asked, his voice smooth, controlled. She held up the phone. Who's Sophie? A flicker of something. Surprise? Guilt? Annoyance? Crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. He let out a breathy laugh and shook his head. Emily, come on. Where did you even find that? In your car, she shot back, her voice sharper than she expected. I saw the messages, Ryan. The photos. She called you babe. Instead of looking panicked or remorseful, he sighed dramatically, rubbing his temple as if she were exhausting him. Jesus, Em. Do you even hear yourself? You're making this into something it's not. Her grip tightened on the phone. I'm not stupid, Ryan. Don't lie to me. He scoffed, stepping closer, his expression shifting from disbelief to condescending concern. I'm not lying, but I think maybe... He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. Maybe you're overthinking things again. You do that sometimes, don't you? The way he said it, so soft, so careful, like he was worried about her, made her hesitate. Overthinking? She echoed, her certainty wavering. Yes, babe, he said, reaching for her hand, his voice dripping with warmth. You tend to spiral, you know that. You see one thing, and your mind runs wild. We've talked about this before. Had they? Emily blinked, struggling to hold on to the anger, the clarity she had felt just moments ago. Then explain the messages, she demanded, but her voice wasn't as strong now. Ryan sighed, shaking his head like she was being ridiculous. She's just a friend, Emily, a clingy one. I've been trying to set boundaries, but she doesn't get it. Those messages? Out of context? The photos? Old? Do you really think I'd be that stupid? His tone was so confident, so dismissive, that doubt began creeping in. But she called you babe. Ryan chuckled softly, squeezing her hand. You're really letting one word make you doubt everything we have? He tilted his head, looking at her like she was breaking his heart. I love you, Emily. You know that, don't you? Did she? Her head spun. The proof had been right in front of her, clear, undeniable. And yet, standing here with Ryan looking at her with such tenderness, such patience, she felt herself unraveling. I don't know, she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I know this is scary, babe. I know how your mind works. But you have to trust me. And just like that, the anger, the certainty, the betrayal, all of it blurred into confusion. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe she was spiraling again. Maybe she was the problem. The breaking point. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she had been overthinking, that the doubts in her mind were just insecurities, that Ryan truly loved her and only her. But then, the truth revealed itself in a way she could no longer ignore. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. She had been at his apartment, curled up on the couch, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her chest ever since their last conversation. Ryan had reassured her, held her, kissed her, and told her she was being paranoid. But the doubt still lingered. And then came the knock on the door. Ryan was in the kitchen making coffee when Emily got up to answer it. She wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe a delivery, a neighbor. But when she swung the door open, she found herself staring at a woman who looked eerily familiar. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The stranger's eyes flickered with recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. You must be Emily, she said, her voice cool, unreadable. Emily's stomach twisted. Who are you? The woman let out a breathy, humorless laugh. I'm Sophie. The name hit Emily like a slap. The messages, the photos, the phone. Before she could react, Sophie crossed her arms. And I'm his fiancé. The world tilted. Emily felt like she had left her body, like she was floating outside of herself, watching this nightmare unfold from a distance. No, that can't be true. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice was weak. Sophie shook her head, pulling out her phone and tapping the screen before holding it up. A picture filled the screen, her and Ryan, smiling in what looked like an engagement party, his arms wrapped tightly around her, his lips pressed against her temple, a diamond ring glinting on her finger. Emily staggered back. This wasn't just cheating, this wasn't just a mistake. Ryan had been living a double life. At that moment, Ryan appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffee mugs, his face drained of color the second he saw Sophie. What the? His voice caught in his throat. Emily turned to face him, and for the first time she saw him clearly, not as the charming, romantic man who had once made her feel like the center of the universe, but as a liar, a manipulator, a stranger. "Tell me she's lying!" Emily demanded, her voice shaking with fury, with heartbreak. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. That hesitation was all she needed. Emily felt something inside her snap, the last thread of whatever illusion had been holding her to him. Without another word, she stepped back, grabbed her bag, and walked out. This time she wasn't looking for answers. She had all she needed. Healing and self-discovery. The first few weeks after leaving Ryan felt like walking through a fog. The weight of betrayal sat heavy on Emily's chest, and the questions haunted her. How did I not see it sooner? How could I have let him manipulate me for so long? But slowly she began to realize that healing wasn't about having all the answers. It was about moving forward despite the questions. At first, the silence in her apartment felt unbearable. No more late-night texts, no more constant phone calls, no more Ryan dictating where she should be or who she should talk to. But as the days passed, Emily began to see that silence wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. She started rediscovering the pieces of herself that had been buried under Ryan's control. She reconnected with old friends, the ones she had pulled away from when Ryan made her believe they weren't good for her. To her surprise, they welcomed her back without hesitation. "We were just waiting for you to see what we already knew," her best friend said with a sad smile. Emily threw herself into things that made her feel alive. She took morning walks without checking her phone every 5 minutes. She picked up painting again, something she had abandoned when Ryan made her feel like it was a waste of time. She booked a solo trip to a city she had always wanted to visit, just because she could. For the first time in a long time, every decision she made was hers, and hers alone. The scars Ryan left weren't invisible. She still caught herself second-guessing things, wondering if she was being too much, if she was overthinking. His voice still echoed in her mind sometimes, but she was learning to silence it, to replace it with her own. One evening, she stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself, really looking. She had spent so much time trying to be the version of Emily that Ryan wanted, that she had forgotten who she was before him. But now she saw strength, resilience, a woman who had loved deeply, who had been hurt, but who refused to let that pain define her. Ryan had broken her heart, but he hadn't broken her. She smiled at her reflection, a quiet promise in her eyes. She was just getting started. True love versus illusion. Months had passed since Emily walked away from Ryan. The pain of betrayal had faded into something quieter, less like an open wound, more like an old scar, a reminder of what she had survived. She had spent so long believing love was about grand gestures, passion, and words that made her heart race. But now she understood. Love wasn't just about what was said. It was about who said it, and whether their actions matched their promises. Love wasn't supposed to feel like constantly walking on eggshells. It wasn't supposed to be a battle between trust and doubt. Love was respect, honesty, safety, and most importantly, love started with herself. One evening, as she sat in a quiet cafe with her journal, writing down dreams she had once put on hold, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" She looked up, meeting the warm gaze of a stranger. Kind eyes, an easy smile. Something about him felt different. For a moment, her past threatened to whisper warnings in her ear. But then she remembered. She was not the same Emily who had fallen for illusions. This time, she would take her time. This time, she would choose love on her terms. She smiled, closing her journal. "No, it's not." And just like that, a new chapter began.